Hello all you beautiful nerds. So back in September I decided I was going to make this clicker, but I wanted to make it relatively quickly. It was more of a practice thing than a showreel piece. And so I made it in about 2 weeks, and I think it turned out pretty good, all things considered. It definitely has some rough edges, but I thought you guys might still want to see the process of me making it. And that's what this is. So just before we jump straight into it, here are my very, very professional reviews for The Last of Us and The Last of Us Part 2. Not that anyone was asking, but anyways. Great, okay. First things first, sculpting. So I started off with a base mesh that I got from a guy called Angel Axiotis. I'll have the link to it in the description, it's free. And I cut off the neck because that was the part, well, the head is the part that I'm going to be doing most of the sculpting on. And I filled in the bottom, and then I moved down the lips so that I can actually get into the mouth. We're also going to be splitting the top lip, so it makes a lot of sense that the mouth is open. I was having a problem with the remesh modifier, and then I realized I just didn't apply scale. So make sure you do that if you're having problems, because that's a very common issue that I happen to run into a lot. I'm using an application called Preorder in order to show my reference. It's just a little application where you can have all your references on a canvas and the application sits above everything else you're doing, so it's really, really useful. I started off by using symmetry, but I eventually turned it off pretty quickly. I just moved up the middle part of the lip and stretched out the sides, building up volume in order to make it seem more clicker-like. If you notice, I have references of the neck and the ears as well. This really helps a lot, and I highly recommend you do the same thing. Even if you've seen something 1,000 times, it's amazing how your brain can trick you. Getting the right shape was not as easy as I thought it would be, but it was a good lesson. For a decent chunk of the video, I didn't feel like my model was three-dimensional enough. Like all the individual parts of the fungus were sort of on a flat plane almost. I had to stretch these out eventually. I used the inflate brush and the blob brush a lot in order to get the actual shape where I wanted it to be. Really useful. Also, of course, the grab brush and using the inverse draw brush is super useful in order to create the crevices in the back of the head, separating the different plates of mushroom, if that's what you call it. So making this model was actually the first time I used Blender 2.8/2.9 for sculpting. The point of this was actually to test out all the new features. And I have to say, it's really good. A vast improvement over 2.79. Now, having said all of that, it doesn't come anywhere close to ZBrush, unfortunately. I use ZBrush a lot, and I have to say, the poly counts that Blender can handle, the amount of vertices and triangles and all that, is just nothing in comparison to ZBrush. I mean, I managed to get about 9 million here, and I can get 30 million with ZBrush without even breaking a sweat. Also, the multi-resolution modifier still has a few glitches, but you'll see those later on. Blender does have far better UI than ZBrush though. Maybe not a better user experience, especially when using a tablet, but just looking at nice UI is so refreshing. I eventually removed this little chunk in the center of the head. I didn't think it fit in too well. So now I start modeling the teeth, and Now you could go and spend all your time sculpting it, but I just made a very basic shape and duplicated and scaled it down a little bit. I just did that the entire way around the mouth. So much easier. And the thing is, nobody's going to notice. I mean, this creature already doesn't look very human. Also, it really helped considering my time constraint. It's amazing how quickly 2 weeks can just disappear on you. Modeling the gums was a very similar process, super basic, but I did eventually sculpt it, so it makes it look a lot nicer. I did need to stretch up the gums to make them go a little bit further. So to create all these little bumps and blob things, I used the blob brush. Makes a lot of sense, right? Super useful for this. And just to create the sort of rugged texture on the individual plates of fungus, all that is the clay strips brush. So there we go, it is now removed, and I think it's far better without it, if I'm perfectly honest. So I decided to push one part of the gums forward to really sell that sort of horrid look, and I rotate some of the teeth at weird angles. I could have gone even further with it. Now this is me grabbing some screenshots I took from The Last of Us 2, just because they were more high res. The model viewer in The Last of Us 2 was so useful here. And you're really starting to see the shape of it all come to life. So here I tried extracting little bits of the model and then using them as more plates, but I found that it was just more of a hassle than actually just digging out sections from the original sculpt. So that's what I continued to do. The importance of having good reference really can't be understated here. Like, I could not have made nearly as good a model, especially for the head, if I didn't have all these screenshots. And throughout the entire process, I'm constantly changing the entire shape of the head, not just little details. Actually, one of the benefits of not having that high res of a model is that you don't go into the little details. So here I decided to mask out the entire part of the head that didn't have mushroom growing on it. And then I set it to a face set. And what that allows me to do is to just easily select the part that isn't infected whenever I wanted to. Super useful. I had some references of fungus, of like actual mushrooms, and I liked the way they were sort of ribbed on the back, so I decided to replicate that. At this point, it's just a matter of just continuing to work at it and trying to test out new different ways of making it look good. There's no recipe for artistic vision. Jesus Christ, that might have been the most hipster thing I've ever said. Believe it or not, the reference that I'm using right now in PureRef is a real-life model that someone made. It's not even from the original game or any official concept, but it looks great, so I'm using it. Again, using reference when sculpting the ear, very, very important. I have a good sense of what the ear should look like, but I still choose to use reference anyways, just to make sure, all the time. And that concludes sculpting the head. So next part is the neck and body. But before we move on to that, let me tell you about this new course I'm making. It's the very first course I have ever actually made, and I put a lot of time and effort into this, and it's going to be about modeling this steampunk Art Deco style rifle. You'll learn how to model for games, use booleans properly and clean up afterwards, retopologize. I'm going to teach you how to make UVs super simple so anyone can understand them. And finally, we'll finish up in substance and make everything look really, really cool. This course contains more than 16 hours of real-time footage, as well as an hour-long time-lapse for you busy people out there. This course also cures your depression, cleans stubborn stains, teaches you how to get a girlfriend/boyfriend, whatever you're into, is recommended by 9 out of 10 dentists, and also does none of the above. The course will officially release on November 10th, but is available for pre-order right now. And if you get it before November 10th, you get 25% off, which means it's only $14.99, which is basically the price of a movie ticket if you live in a big city, or if you live in the UK, or if you go to one of those kind of fancy cinemas. But this is like 16 hours long, so you're getting like 8 times your money. Totally worth it. Link in the description down below. So next I started on the neck. I had some pretty good reference for the neck and body, and what I noticed is that it's just a build-up of standing layers of plates of mushroom. It's really weird, but I guess it makes sense since clickers don't really sit down or lie down, they don't need to sleep or anything like that. So the mushroom plates grew on them basically like a tree trunk. Again, most of this was done with the blob brush and the draw brush. Now some of you may be surprised to find out I don't actually go into that much detail on the hands or the feet and stuff like that. I don't put much time into wrinkles or anything like that, and the reasons for that are twofold. First of all, the model isn't supposed to be viewed from really up close, and second of all, fine details can be done completely within Substance Painter, driven by textures, and that's the way I prefer to work. Large details in Blender, fine details in Substance. This entire sculpting section probably makes up about 30 hours of work. Gleb Alexandrov has a great video talking about where to apply detail and how much of it to apply. And the way he says it is there should be about a third of the model that's very plain looking and sort of not that detailed, a third of the model with coarse or large details, and then a third of the model with really fine details. And I try and think about that a lot while sculpting. So you don't need to apply the fungus everywhere, just every so often. And that's really it. Now I do continue to do a bit more sculpting later on, in the midst of making clothing and retopologizing and everything else, but this is the vast majority of it. Little details like skin pores and all that will be done specifically by the texture. And I also add wrinkles such as on the knees and stuff like that within Substance Painter itself. So the next part will be coming out this Friday, and if you want to make sure you see it, please subscribe. I'm nearly at 1,000. Come on, I'm so close.